Hi, I'm Shane, and I'm going to show you how I make art using techniques that were developed by the Surrealists. And I think these can be utilized by anyone, even if you're new to making art or feel like you're a novice. These are things that anyone can do. Now, I would say that probably 90% of the artwork I make, personal artwork, not work that I do, as commissions or do for other people. But the work that I do personally, I utilize surrealist techniques at least to get started. I always find it more exciting and more fun to make art this way. In case you're not familiar with the surrealists and their techniques, I'll give you a quick overview. 100 years ago, the surrealist movement got started in Paris by poet André Breton when he wrote the Surrealist Manifesto. It was focused on exploring the unconscious and the subconscious mind, and it was influenced by the work of Sigmund Freud. And in the early days of the movement, it was just writers, not artists. They developed ways to tap into the subconscious mind through writing about the imagery of their dreams and through a method called automatic writing. If you've ever read the book The Artist's Way, and this book was really popular when I was younger, the author advocates for an exercise that she calls morning pages, where you just sit and write stream of consciousness for 3 pages every morning. And the purpose of that is to dump out the mental clutter. It's basically the same thing as automatic writing that the Surrealists did. So in the early days of the Surrealist movement, the writers weren't that accepting of the visual artist. They thought that painting and drawing and sculpting, things like that, required too much conscious thought, and that would prevent the visual artist from fully embracing surrealism. While the visual artist could paint images from their dreams, they didn't have their own counterpart to automatic writing. So then in 1927, a German artist, Max Ernst, was in, I believe, a hotel in France. He noticed that there was texture on the floor, like maybe the wood grain of the floorboards. So he put a piece of paper down and he rubbed over it with a stick of graphite. And this transferred the texture to the paper. And when he did this, he could see an image in the pattern, and he drew into it to emphasize that image. Now, this, of course, is pareidolia. And pareidolia is when you see images in everyday objects, sort of like seeing shapes in clouds. Like this cloud looks like a goblin shark, and this sweet potato I grew sort of looks like a little muscular arm. Ernst had invented the first automatic art making method called frottage, which means rubbing. Another method, decalcomania, which is where you apply wet paint or ink to a surface and then press it against another surface, which smears the paint and it forms patterns that you can then, paint into and emphasize. Really, too, the Rorschach ink blot test could also be considered a form of surrealist art, because each person who sees them sees a different image based on their own perspective and their own subconscious mind. So now to my own work. How do I utilize these methods to make my own artwork? Well, I use the decalcomania sometimes, but more often than not, I do this. And I don't know if this technique has a name. It probably does. If you know what it's called, just leave me a comment and let me know. So after I've put on some gesso and got the panel ready to paint, all I do is apply acrylic paint to my panel in a random manner. Now, I don't really care what color it is, and usually I'll just use whatever paint's left over from my last painting. After I slap some paint down, I set the panel on my easel, and then while the paint is still wet, I'll spray it with a water bottle. And I'll spray it heavy in some places, lighter in others. There's no real thought put into it. And this causes the paint to run and sometimes splatter. And then I leave it to dry. Usually I leave it a day or two. Sometimes I give myself longer. I like to give myself a period of time away from it so I forget what it looks like. And when I come back to it, I look at it and see if an image naturally jumps out at me from the patterns that's formed from the running paint. So this is one of the panels that I got started on the other day, painted just some splotches and whatnot. And so I'm going to set it up. So sometimes what I'll do is, take them way that they're initially done, but I'll also rotate them, see if I see anything like that. And I can kind of see this would be like an eye up here. But then I was looking and I was like, oh, well, that's kind of like a mushroom shape there. What I would do is just go in, drawing in what I see, start making the shapes, and the imagery just start coming out. Basically, I'm not going in with any idea for a subject, but instead I'm letting the painting tell me what the subject will be. And once I see something, I'll do a rough outline, and then I'll begin to emphasize areas that naturally occurred when I first applied the paint. As I work in the painting, I'll make decisions to add or remove certain areas. I'm never really strict about it. These methods are just a way to spark my imagination and allow me to work only mildly influenced by planning and structure of my conscious mind. Sort of a partnership of intuition and intellect. When you make art like this, you can be as detailed or as loose as you want to be. I personally add a lot of details most of the time because I like how that looks, but I don't do it every time. And sometimes a particular painting looks better without it. You don't have to feel like there are any rules here. You can emphasize certain areas or not. If while you're making it, you think the painting or drawing needs another element that wasn't there before, then just add it. There are rules in art, but just think of them more like guidelines rather than laws. Break them all you want, because this is your art and no one gets to tell you what to do when you make your art. I really enjoy making art this way. I like going into the studio at the beginning of a painting with no idea what I'm going to be making. I love how the painting itself surprises me. And if I have a particular painting that takes a while, maybe several days or even weeks to complete, the painting will continue to make suggestions throughout the process. There'll be a brushstroke or a blob or a splatter that you'll see something you didn't see before. And for me, this makes the whole experience so much more enjoyable. There were many other art-making methods the Surrealists developed over the years, and there will likely be more invented now that we're in this new period of digital art. There was a parlor game that they did that I always found fun. It's called Exquisite Corpse. And in the writing version, a group of people would pass around a piece of paper or a notebook and take turns writing a word or a phrase. And this is done in such a way that the writing of the others would be hidden, and that way no one would be influenced by what anyone else had written. And then at the end, the entire thing would be uncovered and read as one piece. And of course, it would usually be nonsensical with all these separate random words and phrases combined together, and it would make a surrealist poem or a story. It was basically an early form of Mad Libs. Now, in the artist version of the game, a piece of paper would be folded accordion style, and each person would take turns drawing on a folded panel, not seeing what the previous person had drawn. And then it would be unfolded, revealing a single collaborative surrealist picture. Now, you have probably done this before. I think I remember doing something like that in elementary school. When I was in college, my friends and I would pass the time at night in a coffee shop playing both versions of Exquisite Corpse, and it was always a lot of fun. Also, I thought I would address something in regard to automatic writing, and I only do this because it was a concern that was brought up to me once. Several years ago, I had a gallery show of my work, and I gave a talk there about my methods of making art. And in the talk, I covered a lot of what I've talked about in this video. And when I got on the subject of automatic writing, a woman that was there spoke up and said, automatic writing is used by mediums. It's a form of divination. It's like using a Ouija board, and you should stay away from it. Now, it is true that during the late 1800s and the early 1900s, spiritualists did use automatic writing for that purpose. But when the Surrealists adopted it and adapted it, the intention was different. And even the morning pages from the book The Artist's Way that I mentioned earlier, which is basically the same practice, it was used for a still different reason. The Surrealists were trying to access the subconscious. Morning pages is used as a way to purge mental noise. And I tried morning pages every day for a few weeks after I read that book. This was probably when I was in college or just after I got out of college. But personally, I didn't notice any benefit from doing it. But two, I didn't notice any harm either. I didn't even accidentally contact or receive messages from the spirit world or non-corporeal beings. Of course, this was a concern from that woman, and I understand that. And if it's something that concerns you, then obviously don't do it. As I said, I haven't done it myself in decades, and I don't think I will again, just because I didn't really think it did me any good. While my art does have surreal qualities and imagery, I don't consider myself to be a surrealist with a capital S. I do love looking at surrealist artwork, but I don't follow their manifesto or philosophy. I don't really like to be part of groups. I just kind of picked out methods that they use that work for me. Now, that said, I have found that when I paint like this, and usually when it's a larger painting, something that takes me a while and I really get lost in what I'm doing, there are some interesting things that happen in my life related to whatever painting I happen to be working on. I experience an unusual amount of coincidences related to the painting. I guess what Carl Jung would call synchronicities. I noticed this occurring about 20 years ago, and it doesn't happen with every painting, but it happens a lot. And it only happens when I make art using these surrealist methods. So who knows, maybe the surrealists were onto something. Now, when I first started noticing this, I was kind of interested in what was happening, and I would mention it during art talks, and I would get a lot of strange looks. So maybe it's too weird of a topic for some people. But because of that, I've kind of become reticent about sharing. But I do think I will make a video about it anyway at a later time, because it does happen. And for me, it just adds another layer and keeps me returning to these methods of art making. I worked on it a few hours a day for about 5 days, I guess. So maybe a total of 15 or 20 hours of work on it, which is not uncommon for me. I have had some paintings that would go on for several weeks. Well, I hope that you found some of this helpful, and I thank you for watching.